After a rocky relationship, Rachel McFarland thought it was meant to be when she fell into the arms of a normal guy.
Daryl was just a nice guy. So mild-mannered, it was great.
But behind his seemingly ordinary demeanor was an obsessive monster.
He was just crazy, and there was nothing that was going to stop him.
I love you so much, I don't want to live anymore!
And when Rachel made a new friend, they would both find themselves in a catastrophic battle for their lives.
I was in shock.
I was scared for Rachel's life. I was scared for her children.
There was blood all over the bed, and I knew that I was gonna die.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. After coming out of a difficult 3-year marriage, all 23-year-old Staff Sergeant Rachel McFarland wanted was a peaceful home in which to raise her 14-month-old son.
I was in the Air Force in Oklahoma City, and my marriage to my ex-husband was tumultuous, to say the least. So I didn't really give a whole lot of thought to dating.
So Rachel was surprised when one night in the spring of 2004, she found herself at a small party enjoying a conversation with a 25-year-old man named Daryl Wilson.
Daryl and I were talking, and I noticed that he was very soft-spoken. He seemed kind-hearted, just a nice guy.
As the two shared stories, Rachel couldn't believe how much they had in common.
We each had a child from a previous marriage.
Daughter's 7.
Really?
They were just 6 years apart. And we wore the same perfume cologne, his and hers.
Would it be weird if I asked for your, number?
No, it's 555.
At the end of the night, Rachel felt good about the chance encounter.
I'd had a rotten couple of years, and I warmed to the idea of spending time with a guy that I thought was normal.
A few days later, Daryl called Rachel, and the two set up a movie date at her house.
I could tell he was super nervous. I thought it was pretty endearing.
Rachel learned Daryl worked at the nearby water department and had also come from a difficult marriage.
We got married pretty young.
He told me that they fought constantly, and she told him she wanted a divorce, and that crushed Daryl.
Nice to see my daughter.
I could see how much he was hurt, and I thought to myself, this is a really good guy.
No, things are better. Things are better.
Over the next year, the two continued dating, eventually introducing their children to one another.
Daryl was completely different in every respect from my previous marriage. We did normal, fun things. Daryl and I were just kind of moving along at a steady pace, and that was great.
By August 2005, the couple decided it was time to upgrade to a home where they could all live together comfortably.
I was extremely happy to see Rachel happy. And Rachel and Daryl seemed to get along just great.
Even so, there were a few hurdles to get through.
What is this?
Filling out our mortgage papers.
Daryl had declared bankruptcy, so the mortgage had to be in my name.
I should be the one providing for the family, not you.
He really disliked that. And I couldn't understand why it bothered him so much. But I think it was kind of like an affront to his manhood.
It's okay, I'll take care of it.
I operate almost entirely on logic, and Daryl was much more emotional about things. But I wasn't worried. It seemed like things were going so well.
That fall, after a year and a half together, the two exchanged vows in a private wedding ceremony.
I felt like I was walking on clouds. I believed that I couldn't possibly love anyone more than I loved him.
I was thanking God that she finally had someone that cared about her and cared about her child, and I was happy for her.
Unfortunately, after Daryl quit his job at the water department, a new side to his personality began to emerge.
Daryl really hated it, so Daryl's brother hired him on as a carpenter. Daryl knew basic carpentry, but I guess this was a lot more specialized. So Daryl would come home from work stressed out.
And when I come home, I just want a clean house. You need to calm down. Can you please get this cleaned up?
It was extremely confusing because his normal persona was so gentle.
Soon, Rachel would see her dream of a peaceful home life turn into more tragedy than anyone could have possibly imagined.
He just went crazy.
I never thought in my worst nightmares this would happen.
Rachel, you don't want me, you don't love me, you don't give two about me.
I couldn't scream because he would kill us all.
After 2 months of marriage, Rachel Wilson struggled to comprehend what had changed in her husband, Daryl.
He was so mild-mannered, and now he's just really stressed out with his new job.
I want to come home. I don't want to be tripping over toys all day.
So any negative emotion for him manifested in anger. He was like typical Jekyll and Hyde.
As the holiday season approached, Daryl's mood only got worse.
We were at my squadron Christmas ball, and he was arms crossed, scowling.
Hey man, what's up?
People would say hi to him, and he wouldn't even acknowledge that they were speaking to him. He was incredibly rude. It was embarrassing to me.
Can't believe I'm doing what? I'm not doing anything.
And right then, at that moment, I knew I had to make a break because I'm not gonna put up with it. Not after the first marriage. I'm not doing that.
Rachel felt she had no choice but to kick Daryl out that night.
She was embarrassed. She didn't want to get another divorce, and she didn't know what to do, but that's what she thought was best.
Over the next few months, Daryl called Rachel several times to reconcile. But it wasn't until April 2006 when he actually apologized.
I'm so sorry. You were right. I was being a jerk. I miss you.
I was so incredibly happy. That really impressed me. It seemed more genuine.
Before Rachel knew it, their makeup sessions resulted in their first pregnancy. Daryl moved back in, and initially it seemed he'd turned a new leaf.
His anger level did seem to be much more under control.
I'll take care of this.
After the birth of their daughter, Rachel was pleased when Daryl proved himself a doting new father. By 2010, life only got better for the couple when they welcomed a baby boy, and Daryl landed a federal job with the Department of Defense.
How are you?
I think he felt good. There was a big bump in pay, and then there were great benefits. It was a very happy time.
Sadly, it wouldn't last. Daryl's new job only seemed to stress him out more than ever, as he quickly reverted to his former self.
Rachel, are you stupid? This place is a mess. Clean. You clean all day. Is that what you do?
Daryl's anger took an abrupt upswing.
It soon became obvious to Rachel that the marriage was over.
Every day, it was just like a pit of misery.
So where's dinner?
In 2011, after 6 years of marriage, the couple formally separated.
I know he felt as badly as I did about what a separation between us would do to the kids, but he found somewhere else to live. And we made it work. It felt so amazing with him gone.
That spring, Rachel decided to get out of the house and join one of her friends at a local nightclub, and was glad she did.
I ended up talking to this guy.
I'm Bill.
The 23-year-old introduced himself as Bill Schnittman and explained he was an Olympic trainee at the nearby facility for rowers.
We talked pretty much the rest of the night, and I was just happy to have a diversion. He was super funny and really, really cute.
Rachel thought it was just friendly flirtation, so she was shocked when Bill asked her out to lunch.
We stretched lunch into a couple of hours. I found myself feeling kind of lighthearted and excited. He was amazing.
Bill just made Rachel feel like living life. I could see her free spirit coming back.
As Rachel and Bill grew closer, her newfound happiness was impossible to hide. And over the next year, Daryl became increasingly suspicious that she was seeing someone. Even though they planned to officially file for divorce, Daryl remained possessive of her and began calling and texting Rachel incessantly.
He would either be talking about how I was the love of his life or I was spawn of Satan, and it struck me as really creepy and really out of character for him.
One fateful morning in August 2012, Daryl took his disturbing new behavior one step further.
I spent the night, and when Bill and I got up the next morning, we decided to take a walk. I saw Daryl charging up the front lawn. It was more just shock. Bill had never met him before, and I was scared about what Daryl's intentions were. I figured Bill just wouldn't answer the door, but he did.
In August 2012, Rachel Wilson's boyfriend Bill Schnittman came face to face for the first time with her estranged husband, Daryl.
I didn't think about running, I just did it. And I was scared about what his intentions were. Bill answered the door, and I could sort of hear them talking.
What are you doing here? Where's Rachel?
And Bill kept telling him he needed to leave, and Daryl wouldn't.
I want to talk to her. Rachel! Get out of here! Right now! My wife's in there, huh?
He just stood there and kept yelling.
Fuming, Daryl took off.
Bill and I both believed that he was gonna go back to just being a big a-hole. He'd always been such a normal, boring guy, and we were waiting for him to go back to his normal, boring existence.
Daryl had another plan.
He started tracking me everywhere that I went.
What are you doing here?
He wasn't going to work because he was tracking me around the clock. And that creeped me out bad.
You ever see my kids, Rachel?
Cannot be here.
When I learned Daryl was stalking her, I was scared for Rachel's life because at that point, he was not very stable.
No rights for you.
Soon, Daryl turned his anger toward Bill.
Daryl got Bill's name, and after that, he started Googling Bill. I mean, just everything there was to find about him. He found it.
And it wasn't long before Bill began receiving vulgar, threatening messages from Daryl. By December of 2012, Rachel and Bill couldn't take it anymore, and they both filed protective orders against him.
Daryl was threatening her and Bill continually, and obviously they knew that their lives were in danger and they were really trying to do whatever they could to prevent it.
While Rachel's protective order was approved on behalf of her and her children, Bill's, unfortunately, was not.
Bill would have been granted one, but he somehow made a clerical error, didn't include the right document, and that's why it was denied. But for a man to file a victim protective order against another man is highly unusual.
I was concerned that Daryl would just continue harassing them. That's not normal behavior.
Rachel and Bill also started tracking and recording Daryl's calls and messages.
You're worthless, and I can't stand it. I love a person that would do this to somebody. You're all that matters to me. Do you not understand? I hate you. I love you so much.
I was looking over my shoulder all the time. I was in such a high state of anxiousness.
Then, by the end of December, it seemed Daryl had finally come to his senses.
Daryl sent me an email, and he apologized for his crazy behavior, and then he said, I should have left you alone. It took forever, but this is gonna stop. It was like I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that felt really, really good.
Rachel and Bill went to bed that night, feeling the worst was finally behind them. But they couldn't have been more wrong. In the early morning hours of December 21st, 2012, Rachel Wilson and her boyfriend Bill Schnittman were under attack.
The next thing I was aware of was shouting and gunfire. Daryl had fired several shots and hit Bill twice, in the hand and the shoulder.
Before Rachel could even react, Bill sprang into action despite his injuries.
Bill was fighting with Daryl at the door of the room.
Get off! Rachel, calm down!
Nothing was making any sense. I saw Bill on the floor, and I couldn't understand how he got there. And there was blood all over the bed, and I realized that my left hand had a gunshot wound in it. And then Daryl, he pointed the gun at Bill's head.
See what you did? Did you see what you did?
I knew, no matter what, that I couldn't scream because I couldn't let the kids wake up. If they did, I knew he would kill us all. I couldn't panic. And I knew if he wanted me dead, I was gonna die.
Get in the car right now. Sit down.
He put me in the car,
Come here, huh?
and then he'd rape me.
Here. Take it. Take it. Take it right now.
He handed me his phone and told me to type what he dictated.
This is my last night on Earth. My wife doesn't love me anymore. My happiness. And now it's all over.
It was a very long and rambling suicide note.
Daryl made her post the note to his Facebook page. Luckily, someone who saw the message called 911.
No!
When police arrived there, they were actually in the driveway. He was holding a gun to her head.
At that moment, I thought, I'm dead. The police are here. He's gonna kill me now. And instead, he said,
Get out! Get out!
suddenly, Daryl took off.
Officers quickly followed in pursuit. Meanwhile, Rachel was placed in the police cruiser.
He's hit 100.
I could hear over the police radio details of the chase.
He's at the overpass.
He's hit 124.
With all this chaos and all this horror around me, I was in shock. I couldn't function. And then I saw them bring Bill out on the stretcher. He was still alive. I knew that he'd made it this far. He's hurt really bad, but he's gonna be okay. And at the same time, they brought my kids out. And it was just this flood of relief. Daryl shot himself in the head. I heard that he was still alive, and I thought, oh my gosh.
It was a very gruesome scene on the interstate. And trying to reason what he did, there is no reason for it. You can't explain obsession and craziness. He had a goal, and there was nothing that was going to stop him.
As officers processed the crime scene, Rachel was taken to the nearest hospital while her children stayed with law enforcement.
The gunshot wound itself was pretty straightforward to repair. And then a police officer came in and told me that Daryl had died. I didn't even have time to feel anything.
Later that day, Rachel received more horrible news. Bill had also passed.
That, by far, was the absolute worst. It was worse than seeing him shot. Inside my head, I was just screaming. I don't think I'd ever felt more alone.
Rachel, she was broken. She was just devastated. She really loved Bill. She didn't know what to do without Bill.
Overcome with everything that happened, Rachel thought back to her relationship with Daryl.
There were a lot of things with Daryl that were huge red flags that I didn't give a proper weight. The fact that he was married before and it ended badly, and I knew he had experienced quite a bit of rejection in his life, and he was not able to control his emotions. And I think Daryl felt like he was being replaced by a younger, handsome man, but I didn't understand what can happen in someone when they lose control.
Today, Rachel still feels overwhelming guilt about Bill's tragic murder.
It's impossible to not constantly say to yourself, if only I had been able to get help sooner. It was eating me alive, but nothing I could have done could have saved him.
I still worry about Rachel. She is working towards being happy again, but it is going to take time.
Since Bill's death, Rachel has moved her children back to Iowa.
All of this has obviously changed me forever. There's no way it couldn't. But having the kids to focus on, that helps me a lot.
Shauna Williams and Army Sergeant Sean Williams seemed to be a perfect match, right down to their names.
I knew Sean half my life. I couldn't wait to spend the rest of my life with him.
Mom was the happiest I've ever seen her. She was pretty ecstatic.
But Shauna had no clue her honorable man was hiding a lethal secret.
When I looked at how long Shauna's been doing this, I thought there has to be more victims.
I was shocked and devastated.
And when Shauna discovered the truth about her true love, it would prove he had evil running through his veins.
I was scared. More scared than I've ever been in my life.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. By the time Shauna Williams turned 40, she was used to starting over. After getting pregnant and married at the young age of 20, Shauna and her husband had settled in Goldsboro, North Carolina.
We were married very young. We stayed married 8 years. Decided to go in separate directions.
So in 2004, when a family member in Richmond, Virginia became ill and needed her support, Shauna found herself freshly divorced and planting new roots with her daughter, Lauren.
I was working full-time as a medical assistant. I just started going to school, but I did still miss the family and friends that we left behind in North Carolina. So we would travel back on weekends and holidays.
On one of her visits in April 2009, Shauna was thrilled when she heard from her old friend, Sean Williams.
Actually, I'm in town this weekend, and I was wondering if you wanted to hook up and grab a drink or something.
I remembered Sean because he went to high school with my brother. It had just been such a long time since we had seen each other, but I was looking forward to catching up.
How about coffee? Everybody meets for coffee now.
That'd be great.
Yeah, coffee would be nice.
Now an active duty Army Staff Sergeant stationed in Fort Gordon, Georgia, Sean had clearly transformed into a man.
He gotten a lot taller, a little more distinguished.
And he was about to surprise Shauna with a tender confession.
He told me how much he missed me and told me that he's been in love with me since he was 15.
I know. I just knew one day that you'd be my wife.
It was very flattering.
Today's the first day.
But I didn't feel attracted to Sean.
But Sean, I don't know.
He really wasn't my type.
Still, when she returned to Richmond, Shauna found herself chatting with her Army admirer almost every night.
The more I learned about Sean and what his goals and his dreams were, I realized that they were very similar to mine.
I want to travel, buy a house, settle down.
I want the same things too, you know?
And I started looking at him differently.
Soon, Sean was making regular visits from Fort Gordon to Richmond to visit Shauna.
Things happened pretty fast. The times that we did spend together were amazing, and we just agreed that we wanted to take it to the next level.
Would you consider getting married again?
Oh, yeah. I get married again.
Really?
Yeah.
I really felt that Sean made Mom happy. Just the look on her face, she was smiling more often and just seemed really bubbly. So I was like, okay, that's good.
After her experience of getting pregnant at a young age, Shauna was determined not to take any chances.
So Sean and I made a mutual agreement that we would not be intimate prior to our wedding night. And we both decided to have STD testing done prior to the wedding.
A few days later, Sean arrived in Richmond for their big day.
I showed Sean my test results, and he said that his tests were negative.
You know, the military, they test us every 3 months, so.
And I was okay with that.
I love you. Love you back.
After nearly 7 months together, Shauna Williams married Sean Williams, and she didn't even have to change her name.
I was happy for her. She had finally found someone that I knew was a good person and she could build a life with.
I couldn't wait to spend the rest of my life with him. I was the happiest I had ever been.
But her happiness wouldn't last long. When Shauna learned what lay beneath her husband's charming facade had the power to kill.
This is the kind of thing that you only see on television.
It was devastating. I mean, it was just gut-wrenching.
On September 3rd, 2009, Shauna Williams was excited to finally consummate her marriage with new husband, Army Sergeant Sean Williams.
Our wedding day was so special, and honestly, we were just exhausted. The big night that we were waiting for and just didn't happen that night. And it didn't happen the next night and the next night. And I would ask Sean, you know, well, what's going on?
Honey, is everything okay? I mean...
He had said that he's waited for this since he was 15. And he was nervous.
I don't want to mess things up.
So we just took our time and waited until it just felt right for both of us.
Shortly after their wedding, Sean asked Shauna to move to Georgia, where he was stationed, leaving Shauna torn.
After discussing it, we both agreed that because I was still in school, that it would be best for me to stay in Richmond until after I graduated.
2 years.
I mean, it's gonna be a long 2 years, and I'm gonna
miss the hell out of you, but we'll be fine.
In the meantime, their love, trust, and frequent visits would sustain them. Sean always found sweet ways to stay connected with Shauna, even when he was working late at his second job as a bouncer at a local karaoke bar.
Sean would send funny pictures and text messages and would always tell me how much he missed me and how much he loved me.
But when graduation came and went, Shauna was dismayed to find Sean no longer seemed to view her move to Georgia as an urgent matter.
You're never gonna be able to find a job here. You should probably stay in Richmond.
It kind of struck me as a little strange, seeing as how we were still newlyweds. I just figured maybe it was the stress of his career.
Shauna found herself regretting her decision not to move to Georgia right away, especially when military life became even busier for Sean over the next few months.
I was disappointed. Sean didn't visit Richmond as much. The conversations we had on the phone had dwindled somewhat.
Call me back.
Shauna was kind of let down by that. She was wondering whether or not, you know, he still wanted to be married, if there was something going on.
To her major relief, Sean seemed to regain his fire for her when he received a permanent change in station to Fort Bliss, Texas, and was able to get them off-post housing. On April 10th, 2012, Shauna was finally able to move in with her husband.
Mom was the happiest I've ever seen her. She was getting ready to start the next chapter of her life with her husband, so she was happy.
Shauna counted her blessings until one day that May.
Sean was not the neatest person in the world, so I wanted to clean his car while he was at work and throwing away the bottles and potato chip bags.
Shauna was all too happy to be doing the things she felt a good wife should do, until she stumbled upon something that would make her think twice.
I see something sticking out the driver's side door. I was speechless. I didn't know what to believe.
Oh my God.
That was the beginning of her nightmare.
In the spring of 2012, while cleaning out her husband Sean's car, Shauna Williams was shocked at what she found.
I noticed that there was a box of condoms on the driver's side door. And we're a newly married couple that didn't use condoms.
What the hell are these?
And he said that they were in the car that he had purchased before, and things from that car just got transferred to this car. It was just a mistake.
Shauna wasn't sure what to think, but decided to keep an eye out for anything else suspicious before jumping to conclusions. So over the next few months, Shauna focused on integrating herself into Sean's life.
Sean suggested we have some of his military colleagues over for dinner and drinks. And I figured that this was a perfect opportunity for me to experience being a military wife.
The party was going swimmingly.
So glad you were able to make it. It's so nice to meet you.
Until Sean left to give someone a ride home.
I noticed that Sean left his phone. It started to ring. I just assumed that it was him looking for his phone. So I picked it up.
Hello?
And it was a woman.
I'm looking for Sean. Who is this?
This is Sean's wife. Who is this?
She immediately hung up.
She just had this nagging feeling that there was something going on. So she went through his phone.
There were numerous text messages and pictures of other women. He's proposing to other women. I found pictures of half-naked women. Everything that Sean told me, he's now telling multiple other women. I was floored.
When Sean returned home a few minutes later, Shauna was hell-bent on finding out just what was going on.
I think I left my phone.
Oh yeah, you left your phone, all right. And you're not gonna get it back, Sean, until you tell me what the hell is going on.
What are you talking about?
What do you mean, what am I talking about?
I said, no, you need to explain why these text messages and these photos are in your phone. Sean admitted that the text messages were very inappropriate and said that he decided to entertain other conversations until I moved from Richmond.
What happened again?
He said, please don't leave me. I love you. I'm sorry. It was wrong.
It was stupid, but I swear to God, I was lonely.
As difficult as it was, Shauna decided to try and forgive her husband.
I loved my husband, and I wanted this to work and was willing to confront it, correct him, but to just move on.
Still, as much as Shauna wanted to move past what she had found, she simply couldn't. The idea of catching Sean in his lies consumed her.
I turned into an investigator. I went through his personal items looking for any sign that this behavior is still going on.
It wasn't until that July, while Sean was at work, when Shauna spotted something suspicious.
The papers were stuffed in the glove compartment. So I went in the bathroom with the papers.
And the very first words Shauna read, there in black and white, knocked the breath right out of her.
I was stunned. I was floored.
This man is a sociopath and a predator.
I couldn't breathe. I started to shake. I think in that moment, my heart stopped.
In July of 2012, Shauna Williams stumbled upon something shocking in her husband's car.
I saw that they were medical records. 2 words on those medical records jumped out at me. They were herpes and HIV.
Not only did Sean have HIV, but he had known his status for 6 years.
You know, the military, they test us every 3 months.
The medical records dated back to 2006, 3 years before we were married. I couldn't breathe. I started to shake.
Shauna was determined to be tested as soon as possible.
My initial HIV test was done at the military hospital. When I asked how long it would take, they said 10 days, which was gonna be the longest 10 days of my life.
The next several hours were a blur as Shauna met with military lawyers and investigators to report her husband's deception.
One of the questions the military personnel asked was if I had knowledge of anyone else that Sean was involved with.
Having sexual relations with anybody else?
And I remembered then that I still had his phone.
Military police brought Sean to headquarters while they investigated and placed him in military barracks.
All I thought about was, oh my God, am I going to die? And I was scared, more scared than I've ever been in my life.
Finally, after 10 days, Shauna learned her test results.
She said, you're HIV negative. And I was so relieved.
But relief soon turned to fear when Shauna remembered it could take up to a year for the virus to develop.
This means you do need continued testing.
Okay.
As Shauna tried to come to grips with what had happened, she couldn't help but pore over her history with Sean.
The fact that I had my lab results and that he didn't have his, the condoms in his car, the multiple text messages and pictures. Looking back, the red flags were there. I think my heart just chose not to pick up on them.
Shauna had so many questions. And in late August, she finally had the chance to ask Sean through a military-arranged meeting.
Why would you do this to me? To me?
Because I love you, Shauna, and I didn't want to lose you.
He still stuck to his story that he was never unfaithful.
I don't believe.
I'm telling you the truth.
Unfortunately, holding Sean accountable would prove to be a long and daunting process. It wasn't until November 2013 when Shauna finally heard from a JAG prosecutor. Thanks to the contents of Sean's phone, they'd been able to confirm Sean had failed to inform 7 other women of his HIV status. One of his victims, Alicia Clark, met him in 2009 in Georgia.
I first met Sean when I had gone out to a local karaoke bar. He started flirting with me, and over the course of a few weeks, he got a little more persistent. You know, he started walking me to my car. He would tell me that he was in love with me and that he wanted to marry me.
You're the love of my life.
We started discussing things possibly being taken to a physical level. So I asked him, how often are you tested for STDs?
Oh, I get the military, they test me every 3 months.
Oh.
We were all shocked. I think Sean went into the military, and when he realized how much women like a man in uniform. He just went off the deep end.
Luckily, none of the women were infected, but there was no telling how many more had been exposed. On September 9th, 2014, Sean Williams pleaded guilty to 8 counts of aggravated assault, 6 counts of adultery, and 1 count of disobeying direct orders. He was dishonorably discharged from the Army and received an 8-year federal prison sentence.
It was very hurtful and emotional to know that someone that I fell in love with deeply could hurt me in such a devastating way.
Today, Shauna is starting over again. Even though for the last 2 years she has tested negative for HIV, her ordeal still weighs heavily on her.
I'm different. I don't easily trust people the way that I used to.
But with each day, Shauna believes that God spared her health and gave her strength to live her life to the fullest.
Shauna's made a lot of steps moving forward. I'm noticing a calmness coming over, and she's starting to smile a little bit more.
Life today is much better. And I have a wonderful, supportive family, and my friends have been amazing. And with that network that I have, it can't get anything but better.
The rain had been falling for 3 straight hours when the first patrol car rolled into the narrow alley behind the electronics market in eastern Seoul, its headlights cutting through the mist like 2 pale blades, slicing open a scene no one there would ever forget, a scene that would sink into the bones of the city and refuse to leave for nearly 3 decades, a scene that would one day be whispered about as the moment a cold case was born. It was November 17th, 1997. Just past 2:40 a.m., and the street should have been empty. The shops sealed behind steel shutters, the neon signs long extinguished, the city itself retreating into uneasy sleep. But instead, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the echo of a scream that tore through the rain, sharp, broken, desperate, and then abruptly silenced, leaving behind only the hollow hiss of water striking asphalt and the stunned breath of witnesses who did not yet understand what they had just heard. At the center of it all lay a young woman, face down, motionless, her dark hair fanned across the wet pavement like spilled ink, her coat soaked through, her handbag several meters away, as if torn from her grasp mid-struggle, her body bearing the unmistakable stillness that signals the line between life and death has already been crossed, a line that cannot be undone. Her name was Kong Minesio, 24 years old, a university graduate, recently employed at a mid-sized trading company near Jongno, known by friends as quiet, diligent, almost invisible in social gatherings, the kind of person people struggle to describe beyond polite phrases and gentle smiles, the kind of person no one expects to become the center of a nightmare. Yet here she was, alone in the rain, her life extinguished in a forgotten alley, the first piece in a puzzle that would refuse to assemble itself for the next 28 years. The officers moved fast. Yellow tape went up. Flashing lights turned the rain into falling shards of red and blue. Footprints were already dissolving in the water. Cigarette butts, paper scraps, fragments of plastic. Any of them could be evidence. Any of them already lost forever. The coroner's initial assessment was brutal in its simplicity. Severe blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with repeated strikes. Defensive wounds on the forearms. Torn fabric near the shoulder. No immediate sign of sexual assault. Time of death estimated between 1:50 and 2:20 a.m. The question, burning in the air like electricity, was simple. Who did this and why? Minus Yo had left her office party shortly after midnight. Her colleagues confirmed she declined an offer to share a taxi, saying she wanted to walk to the subway station a few blocks away, enjoying the quiet after a long day. She never arrived. Somewhere between the laughter she left behind and the train she would never board, her path intersected with someone else's, someone whose presence would erase her future. Detectives canvassed the area. The electronics market was a maze of shops and warehouses, dense, poorly lit, riddled with blind corners and hidden passages. Shop owners were questioned. Night guards interviewed. Taxi drivers stopped. Street vendors tracked down. No one had seen anything. Or rather, no one was sure they had. One man recalled a figure running, head down, coat flapping, but couldn't describe the face. A woman thought she heard angry voices, maybe a struggle, but assumed it was drunk men fighting. A security guard remembered a parked motorcycle that wasn't there the next morning, but couldn't recall its color. Every memory was blurred, distorted by rain, distance, fear, and uncertainty, each fragment too weak to stand on its own, each one slipping through investigators' fingers like water. Inside Minasio's handbag, police found her wallet, identification, subway pass, and office keycard. Nothing missing. No signs of robbery. No immediate motive. At her small apartment, untouched and orderly, detectives searched for clues. Her diary revealed nothing more than mundane entries about work stress, family obligations, exhaustion. No secret relationships. No heated arguments. No hidden enemies. Her phone records showed routine calls to her mother, her sister, a close friend. No suspicious contacts. No threatening messages. She had not been targeted, it seemed. She had simply been in the wrong place, at the worst possible time. Or so it appeared. But as the days stretched into weeks, and the investigation deepened, subtle cracks began to appear in that neat explanation, cracks that hinted at something far more deliberate, far more disturbing. Because Kang Min-seo was not the first young woman to vanish or die in that part of Seoul under unexplained circumstances. And she would not be the last. The police files revealed a chilling pattern. Over the previous 3 years, 5 women, all between 20 and 30, all commuting late at night, all disappearing within a 2-kilometer radius of the same market district. 3 had eventually been found alive, traumatized, unwilling or unable to describe their attackers. 1 had never been found at all. And now, Min-seo, discovered lifeless in the rain. Individually, the cases were dismissed as unrelated. Street crime, isolated assaults, random violence in a sprawling city. But side by side, they formed a constellation of fear, a shadow moving through the urban night, unseen, unchallenged. The media seized on it instantly. Seoul Night Stalker? One headline screamed. Young women fear late commutes, warned another. But police leadership resisted the idea of a serial offender. There was no signature, no consistent method, no definitive link. To admit otherwise would be to admit a predator was operating freely in the capital, and in the wake of the Asian financial crisis, with unemployment soaring and public anxiety already raw, that was a panic they were not prepared to unleash. So the case remained classified as a homicide by unknown assailant. And slowly, quietly, the trail began to cool. Detectives chased hundreds of leads. Known offenders, recently released inmates, local gang members, transient laborers, delivery drivers, security guards, anyone who moved through the area at night. Each suspect was questioned, each alibi checked, each lead eventually collapsed into nothing. Forensic analysis, limited by the technology of the era, yielded only frustration. The rain had washed away most trace evidence. No usable fingerprints. No clear DNA. No weapon recovered. The medical examiner could only conclude the fatal blows were delivered by a blunt object, possibly metal, possibly wood, but no definitive shape or size. Every path led into darkness. At Min-seo's funeral, her mother collapsed beside the coffin, her cries echoing through the hall, raw, animal, unbearable. Her father stood frozen, eyes fixed on nothing, as if the world itself had ceased to exist. Friends whispered in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the gentle girl they knew with the brutal ending she had suffered. And somewhere unseen, unknown, Someone carried the weight of what they had done. Weeks passed, then months, then years. The file was moved from the active investigation cabinet to the long shelves of unresolved crimes, where folders slowly yellowed and dust gathered in the corners, where hope decayed quietly, where justice learned how to wait. But the city did not forget. In the late hours, commuters walked faster. Women clutched their bags tighter. Taxi drivers refused certain routes. Parents waited up long after midnight for daughters who were already adults, their fear unable to distinguish between logic and terror. And in police stations, detectives who had once worked the case sometimes opened the file again, flipping through photographs, witness statements, grainy black and white prints of the alley, searching for something they might have missed, some overlooked detail that could suddenly breathe life back into the investigation. Nothing ever did. Until, 28 years later, a single piece of forgotten evidence, sealed inside a neglected box, would force the case back into the light, threatening to expose not just a killer, but the uncomfortable truth about how easily critical details can vanish, how thin the line between resolution and eternal mystery truly is. But that moment, that turning point, was still far away. For now, all that existed was a cold night, a rain-soaked alley, and a young woman whose final footsteps echoed endlessly through the corridors of an unsolved crime. The first 72 hours after Kong Minasio's murder were a blur of exhaustion, urgency, and mounting pressure, a race against time that every detective understood might decide whether this case would ever be solved, because in homicide investigations, the earliest hours are the fragile window where truth still lingers in the open, before it fades, before memories harden into lies, before evidence dissolves into nothing. Detective Park Jun-ho barely slept. His suit reeked of rain and stale coffee. His eyes burned from staring too long at photographs of the alley, replaying the scene in his mind again and again, trying to force the chaos into some pattern that made sense. Every step Minesio had taken that night became sacred ground, every minute a potential key, every witness statement a thin thread that might lead somewhere, anywhere. The route from her office building to the subway station was reconstructed in obsessive detail. Street by street, corner by corner, light posts measured, camera angles mapped. But in 1997, Seoul's surveillance infrastructure was sparse, fragmented, unreliable. Most shops relied on basic security systems, many not functioning, some not even turned on. Of the 12 cameras covering portions of her route, only 4 had captured anything at all, and all 4 produced footage so grainy and dark it was closer to suggestion than documentation. One clip showed a blurred figure crossing the street roughly 5 minutes after Minesio had been last seen. The silhouette was tall, or maybe average, wearing a long coat, or perhaps a jacket. The rain smeared the lens, transforming reality into impressionist distortion. Another clip recorded headlights sweeping across wet asphalt. A third showed an alley entrance, empty. The fourth captured nothing but static and flickering shadows. No face, no plate numbers, no clear direction of travel. Witness statements followed a similar pattern. A convenience store clerk believed Minesio had purchased a bottled coffee shortly after midnight. The timestamp on the receipt matched. A taxi driver remembered seeing a woman resembling her near a pedestrian crossing. A street cleaner claimed he heard running footsteps moments before the scream. None of them could agree on exact times. None could describe anyone suspicious. Their accounts overlapped and contradicted, blurring together until the timeline itself became unstable. As investigators struggled to anchor the story, another development complicated everything. 2 days after the murder, a man walked into Jongyo Police Station and confessed. His name was Choi Sang-woo, 34 years old, recently fired from a warehouse job. History of alcohol abuse. Prior arrests for assault. His clothes were filthy. His breath reeked of cheap liquor. His hands trembled as he signed the statement. He claimed he had followed Minesio, attacked her in a drunken rage, and fled in panic. He described the alley, the rain, the darkness. He even mentioned her handbag lying several meters away. For a moment, the entire station froze. Confessions in fresh homicide cases are rare. Confessions with specific details are rarer still. Park felt the weight of possibility settle heavily in his chest. Could it really be this simple? The interrogation lasted nearly 8 hours. Slowly, carefully, detectives dismantled Choi's story. His timeline conflicted with the coroner's estimate. His description of the alley layout contained subtle but telling errors. He claimed to have struck her with a pipe, but no pipe had been recovered, and his explanation for disposing of it shifted repeatedly. Most damning of all, forensic testing found no traces of Menacio's blood or fibers on his clothing or belongings. When confronted, Choi broke down, sobbing, admitting he had fabricated the confession after hearing details on the news, desperate for attention, desperate to feel important, desperate to turn his own meaningless life into something, anything, even if that meant becoming a murderer. The confession collapsed, leaving behind only bitter frustration and wasted time. And yet, its impact was profound. For nearly 48 hours, investigative momentum had stalled as resources poured into verifying a lie. In a case where every hour mattered, those lost days would never be recovered. As the weeks progressed, political pressure intensified. Media scrutiny sharpened. Editorials demanded swift justice. Parents demanded safety. City officials demanded reassurance. Police leadership demanded results. And in that suffocating environment, decisions were made that would later haunt everyone involved. The task force narrowed its focus onto 3 primary suspects. The first was a delivery driver who worked overnight routes through the electronics district. He had a prior conviction for attempted assault. His truck passed within 1 block of the alley at 1:58 a.m. Phone records placed him nearby. Under interrogation, he grew defensive, evasive, combative. But surveillance logs confirmed he was unloading goods at a warehouse 2 kilometers away during the estimated time of death. His employer verified it. So did 3 coworkers.
He was released.
The second was a night watchman assigned to a nearby construction site. He had been seen arguing with a woman earlier that evening. He admitted to heavy drinking. But witnesses confirmed the argument had occurred nearly 3 hours before Menacio's disappearance. His security logs showed him checking gates at the exact moment she was likely attacked. His alibi held. The third was a university student with a history of voyeurism and stalking. He lived within walking distance of the alley. His room contained newspaper clippings of female victims. His internet searches, though primitive by modern standards, raised concerns. Yet no physical evidence tied him to the crime. No eyewitness identified him. No timeline placed him at the scene. He denied involvement, and nothing disproved it. One by one, the leads collapsed. The investigation began to hemorrhage hope. Behind closed doors, whispers emerged about procedural failures. Evidence mishandled. Witness interviews rushed. Potential connections to the earlier disappearance cases insufficiently explored. But publicly, the official narrative remained controlled, confident, unwavering. Then, in early January 1998, something happened that changed everything and yet, paradoxically, solved nothing. An anonymous tip line message arrived at the Central Precinct at 3:12 a.m. The voice was male.
Calm. Measured.
Disturbingly composed. He claimed to know who killed Kong Menacio. He described a man who worked in the shadows, someone who watched for weeks before choosing his moment. He said the killer kept souvenirs. He said the murder was only 1 chapter. He ended with a single sentence. You are looking in the wrong direction. The call lasted exactly 53 seconds. Tracing it led nowhere. The phone booth had been wiped clean. No fingerprints. No witnesses. No cameras. Some detectives believed it was a sick prank. Others felt a deeper chill, an instinctive certainty that the voice carried the weight of truth. But without evidence, it joined the growing pile of unanswered questions. And then, the trail went cold. Budgets shifted. Personnel rotated. New cases demanded attention. The task force shrank. Meetings became infrequent. Updates grew sparse. Eventually, the file was marked inactive. In official terms, the investigation remained open. In practical reality, it had stalled into paralysis. Years passed. The electronics district transformed. Old warehouses became cafes. Neon signs gave way to LED displays. Surveillance cameras multiplied, watching every corner, recording every movement, capturing lives in relentless detail. The alley where Minnesio died was repaved, widened, illuminated. Pedestrians walked through it daily, unaware of the violence once soaked into its concrete. But memory lingered. Every anniversary brought brief media flashes, grainy photos, somber headlines, appeals for new information. Each year, the responses dwindled. Fewer calls, fewer leads, less hope. Within the police force, younger detectives learned about the case as a cautionary tale. Evidence degrades. Witnesses forget. Time devours truth. Solve it quickly, or it may never be solved at all. And yet, buried deep inside the evidence archive, in a climate-controlled room few ever entered, a small sealed box remained untouched, mislabeled, overlooked, its contents dismissed as irrelevant by exhausted investigators rushing toward louder clues. Inside that box lay the quiet beginning of an ending no one could yet imagine. Because 28 years later, when technology, persistence, and coincidence finally converged, that forgotten fragment would erupt into the present, tearing open the past, rewriting everything detectives thought they understood, and forcing an entire city to confront a chilling possibility. That the truth had been waiting all along. Time did not heal the wound left by Kong Minesio's death. It merely sealed it beneath layers of daily life, allowing the city to move forward while the scar remained, invisible but tender, aching beneath the surface. In the years that followed, her name faded from headlines, but not from the memories of those who had stood in the rain that night, staring down at a body that should never have been there, nor from the nightmares of parents who watched their daughters leave the house after sunset, hearts tightening with unspoken fear. The case file gathered dust, but the echoes of it rippled outward, intersecting with other tragedies, other disappearances, other whispers that, taken alone, seemed unremarkable, yet together formed a disturbing pattern that no one could fully ignore. In 1999, 2 years after Minesio's murder, a 21-year-old vocational student named Lee Hygiene vanished while walking home from a late shift at a bakery, less than a kilometer from the same electronics district. Her last call, placed to her sister at 11:47 p.m., was casual, almost cheerful. She mentioned the rain, the cold, the way the streetlights blurred against the wet pavement. She never arrived home. Her body was found 3 days later on a riverbank downstream, tangled in reeds, face bruised, clothing torn, lungs filled with water. Official cause of death: drowning, with evidence of prior assault. The case was initially treated as a separate incident, an opportunistic crime by an unknown attacker. No arrest was ever made. In 2002, a graduate student named Park Soo-yeon disappeared after leaving a late-night study session. Her route overlapped partially with Minesio's. Her phone was later discovered abandoned in a public restroom, wiped clean of fingerprints. No body was found. No suspects identified. Her case remains open. Individually, these tragedies blended into the background noise of urban crime statistics. Collectively, they whispered of something darker, something systematic, something moving with deliberate patience through the city's shadows. Yet institutional inertia is powerful. Without concrete links, without forensic proof, without eyewitness testimony, the cases remained isolated islands of grief, separated by time, geography, and bureaucratic barriers. Each investigative team focused narrowly on its own tragedy, rarely stepping back far enough to see the emerging shape of a pattern. Except for one man. Detective Park Joon-ho never let Minesio's file fully leave his desk. Even after reassignment, even after promotion, even as newer cases piled up, he returned to it late at night, tracing timelines, cross-referencing locations, overlaying maps, searching for connections invisible to others. His obsession strained his marriage, frayed his nerves, but he could not release the feeling that something fundamental had been missed. In 2004, He submitted an internal report suggesting the possibility of a serial offender targeting young women commuting alone late at night in eastern Seoul. The response was swift and dismissive. Statistical overlap, urban density, confirmation bias. Correlation did not equal causation. Park accepted the official verdict, but not internally. He continued his quiet analysis, building his own private archive of cases, newspaper clippings, court records, missing person reports. Over time, a haunting consistency emerged. Similar time windows, similar victim profiles, similar environmental contexts.
Rain.
Dimly lit streets, transitional spaces between safety and vulnerability. And yet, the killer, if such a killer existed, left no signature, no repeating weapon, no ritual, no taunting communications, only absence. In 2007, a new lead briefly reignited hope. A woman named Han Miran contacted police, claiming she had narrowly escaped an attack in 1998 near the same alley where Min Seo died. At the time, traumatized and fearing retaliation, she had refused to file a formal report. Now, after years of therapy, she felt compelled to speak. Her account was chilling. She described a man stepping out of a doorway, blocking her path, speaking softly, almost politely, before suddenly striking her with overwhelming force. She fought back, screamed, clawed at his face. A passing car startled him, and he fled. She remembered the smell of industrial grease, the coarse texture of his gloves, the way he limped slightly as he ran. A composite sketch was produced. It resembled no known suspect, no existing criminal profile. It matched no prior witness description. But it added a crucial dimension: intent. This was not random violence. This was predation. The revelations sparked renewed interest. Cold case units re-examined Min Seo's file. Old evidence was pulled from storage. Witnesses were recontacted. But the years had taken their toll. Memories had faded. Some witnesses had died. Others had moved overseas. Physical evidence had degraded beyond usefulness. Even Han's description, vivid as it was, remained frustratingly intangible. The investigation, once again, slipped into silence. Then, in 2012, another anomaly surfaced. A middle-aged man named Kim Yong-tae was arrested for a series of brutal assaults on women near Seoul's Han River. His methods were erratic, violent, impulsive. But during interrogation, he mentioned, almost casually, that he had once known someone worse, someone who didn't act out of rage, someone who planned. He refused to provide a name, claimed he had forgotten it, said the man worked in logistics, maybe electronics, said he had met him years earlier at a warehouse. When pressed, Kim shut down completely, retreating into silence. Investigators attempted to track his former co-workers, but records from the 1990s were incomplete.
Companies had dissolved. Archives lost.
The lead evaporated. And so, the shadow persisted, flickering at the edges of certainty, never fully revealing its shape. Meanwhile, Min Seo's family aged beneath the weight of unresolved grief. Her parents moved from their apartment, unable to bear the silence of her empty room. Her younger sister abandoned her university studies, plagued by anxiety, haunted by the idea that the world was fundamentally unsafe. Holidays became rituals of endurance. Birthdays became days of mourning. Each year, they returned to the alley, laying flowers, lighting candles, whispering prayers into the indifferent concrete, hoping, irrationally, that the dead might somehow hear. As technology advanced, the concept of cold case investigation transformed. DNA databases expanded. Forensic sensitivity increased. Digital records multiplied. Algorithms emerged capable of detecting patterns humans could not. Yet Min Seo's case remained stubbornly beyond reach, a relic of an era when crucial data simply did not exist. Until, in 2023, a routine audit of evidence storage uncovered a discrepancy. A box listed as miscellaneous fabric samples did not match its recorded weight. When opened, it revealed several sealed envelopes marked with case numbers from the late 1990s, including Min Seo's. Inside one envelope lay a fragment of dark fiber, collected from beneath her fingernails during the autopsy, dismissed at the time as contamination, never subjected to advanced testing. A single thread, barely visible, almost nothing. Yet in the age of modern forensic science, almost nothing could be everything. The sample was sent to the National Forensic Laboratory for reanalysis using updated DNA extraction techniques capable of isolating genetic material from microscopic traces. Technicians worked carefully, methodically, uncertain whether decades-old material could yield any result at all. For days, there was silence. Then one evening, a call arrived at the cold case unit. They had a partial profile. Not enough for a direct identification, but enough to begin a search. And suddenly, after 28 years, the darkness stirred. The laboratory lights hummed softly as technicians leaned over stainless steel tables, their gloved hands moving with deliberate precision, coaxing information from a fragment so small it might once have been dismissed as dust. The fiber taken from beneath Kong Minasio's fingernails had spent nearly 3 decades sealed in darkness, aging, degrading, its genetic secrets locked inside molecular fractures. Yet modern forensic science had learned how to speak to silence, how to extract voices from the faintest traces, how to resurrect stories long thought erased. The partial DNA profile that emerged was incomplete, fragmented, but unmistakably human, unmistakably male. And more importantly, it did not belong to any officer, paramedic, or medical examiner who had handled the body, which meant it likely belonged to the killer. The discovery electrified the cold case unit. For the first time in 28 years, the investigation possessed something tangible, something that could be compared, mapped, searched. A digital representation of the person who had stood face to face with Minacio in her final moments. Yet the initial database sweep yielded nothing. The profile matched no known offender in South Korea's National DNA Registry. No arrests. No convictions. No records. At first, this felt like another dead end. But seasoned investigators recognized something else. The absence of a match did not mean the absence of a suspect. It meant the suspect had never been caught. Or never been tested. A new strategy took shape. Detectives expanded the search beyond criminal databases, turning to familial DNA analysis, a controversial yet increasingly powerful method that identifies partial genetic overlaps with relatives who may have submitted samples for unrelated reasons: medical testing, immigration screenings, military service, or previous investigations. The approach was delicate. Legal frameworks were strict, ethical debates intense. But under special authorization, analysts began scanning anonymized datasets for genetic markers resembling the unknown profile. Days blurred into nights. Algorithms churned through millions of records, assembling statistical probabilities, calculating relationships, eliminating impossibilities. Then, in early February 2025, a breakthrough. A partial match surfaced in a military service DNA archive, linking the unknown profile to a man who had served compulsory duty in the late 1990s. The overlap was too weak for identification, but strong enough to suggest a familial connection, likely a first-degree relative. The soldier's name was withheld, but his family records pointed to an older brother. His name was Seo Jae-hyun, 56 years old, former logistics supervisor, currently employed at a small shipping warehouse in Incheon. The name hit Detective Park Jun-ho like a physical blow. Seo Jae-hyun. He had interviewed him in 1997. At the time, Seo worked as a subcontracted night coordinator for a freight company operating near the electronics district. His duties required him to move between warehouses after midnight, overseeing deliveries, resolving disputes, inspecting cargo. He had access to alleys, storage yards, loading docks, spaces where people passed through, rarely noticed, poorly lit, transient. He had been one of hundreds questioned, and then forgotten. Park pulled the old transcript from storage. Seo's answers were calm, polite, cooperative. He reported being on duty the night of Minasio's murder, overseeing a delayed shipment. He claimed to have remained inside the main warehouse until nearly 3 a.m. His supervisor at the time confirmed his presence. No contradictions. No red flags. No reason to pursue him further. But now, decades later, the genetic whisper rose from the past, urging a second look. A surveillance team was quietly assembled. They monitored Sio's movements, his routines, his social interactions, his habits. What they saw unsettled them. He lived alone in a modest apartment. No spouse, no children, no close relationships. His neighbors described him as polite, reserved, almost invisible. He left for work at dusk, returned before dawn. On weekends, he walked aimlessly through older neighborhoods, lingering in alleyways, standing beneath streetlights, watching foot traffic without apparent purpose. His digital footprint was sparse. No social media, no online shopping, minimal phone usage. He paid bills in cash whenever possible. It was as if he had spent his entire adult life trying not to exist. A covert sample was needed. Under legal authorization, investigators collected DNA from a discarded coffee cup Sio left in a convenience store trash bin. The sample was rushed to the lab. The waiting was excruciating. When the results arrived, silence filled the briefing room. The match probability exceeded 99.999%. The DNA beneath Minasio's fingernails belonged to Seo Jae-hyun. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then, the implications crashed down. If Seo was responsible for Minasio's murder, what about the others? What about Lee Hae-jin, Park Soo-yeon, the unnamed victims who never reported their trauma? How many stories had ended in the shadows of his routine? Arrest teams mobilized at dawn. Seo was taken into custody without resistance, his face blank, his eyes distant, as if he had been waiting for this moment, or perhaps had long since abandoned hope that it would ever arrive. In the interrogation room, under the sterile glare of fluorescent lights, he sat motionless, hands folded neatly, posture impeccable, the image of controlled restraint. Detective Park faced him across the table. For a long moment, they studied each other, two men separated by 28 years of silence. Then Park slid the lab report forward. Seo glanced at it. He did not flinch. He did not protest. He did not deny. Instead, he closed his eyes and exhaled. The confession, when it came, was fragmented, hesitant, unfolding in cautious increments, as if each word carried unbearable weight. He spoke of loneliness, of resentment, of a life spent watching others move forward while he remained frozen. He described following Minacio for weeks, memorizing her routine, waiting for a moment when the world would be empty enough to conceal his intentions. He described the rain as a blessing, a curtain that blurred sight, muffled sound, dissolved evidence. But when questioned about the others, his composure fractured. He denied involvement, then contradicted himself, then fell into silence. The investigation exploded outward. Cold cases were reopened, evidence re-examined, patterns remapped, witnesses recontacted, survivors sought out. The city held its breath. Because if Seo Jae-hyun was telling only part of the truth, then the past 28 years had concealed far more horror than anyone was prepared to face. And as detectives began peeling back the layers of his carefully constructed anonymity, they discovered something that transformed the case from a singular tragedy into a chilling chronicle of predation stretching across decades. A hidden archive, a private map, a record of obsession. The apartment smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, the sterile sharpness of chemical cleaners battling unsuccessfully against the slow decay of time. Everything inside Seo Jae-hyun's home appeared meticulously ordered, unnervingly neat, as if chaos itself had been banned from crossing the threshold. Shoes aligned precisely at the door. Dishes stacked by size. Clothes folded with geometric precision. The walls were bare, devoid of photographs, artwork, or personal mementos, offering no hint of sentiment, no trace of attachment, no visible proof that a human life unfolded inside. Yet the absence of clutter did not bring comfort. It amplified unease. Because in spaces stripped of personality, secrets tend to echo louder. Investigators moved methodically through the rooms, cataloging every object, every document, every digital device. Nothing was overlooked. Nothing assumed insignificant. Every drawer was emptied. Every book opened. Every envelope unfolded. And then, behind a false panel in the wardrobe, they found the archive. At first glance, it resembled a maintenance log. Plain brown folders stacked neatly in chronological order.
Dates, times,
Locations. Simple annotations. The handwriting was compact, controlled, disturbingly consistent across decades. But as detectives began reading, the horror unfurled. Each folder documented a woman. Descriptions of clothing, hairstyles, commuting routes, daily routines, notes on habits, vulnerabilities, emotional states inferred from body language. Some entries included crude sketches of street layouts. Others held clipped transit schedules. Several contained photographs, taken from a distance, grainy yet unmistakably voyeuristic. And at the center of each file lay a red mark. A circle. In the earliest folders, the circle appeared alone, cryptic, unexplained. But over time, a chilling legend emerged. Blue triangles marked surveillance. Black squares denoted aborted attempts. And red circles, completed acts. Kong Minasio's name appeared on the third shelf. Her folder was thicker than most. Weeks of surveillance logs. A hand-drawn map of her route home. Observations of her expressions. Her gait. Her moments of hesitation at intersections. He had studied her like prey, reducing a living human being to data points and patterns until her existence became something he could predict, control, possess. Yet what chilled investigators most was not Minasio's file. It was the number of others. 32 folders bore red circles. 32 women. 32 lives marked, in his mind, as completed. Cross-referencing these files with police databases triggered a cascade of shock. 15 matched known victims of assault. 6 matched unsolved homicides. 5 aligned with missing persons reports, bodies never recovered. The remaining 6 had never been reported at all, which meant either they survived and stayed silent, or no one ever noticed they were gone. The implications were staggering. Seo Jae-hyun was not merely a murderer. He was a predator who had operated undetected for decades, refining his methods, adapting to changes in technology, shifting locations as neighborhoods evolved, always staying just ahead of visibility, just beneath suspicion. And the deeper investigators dug, the darker the pattern became. Seo's early offenses were chaotic, impulsive, driven by uncontrolled rage. The notes revealed failed attacks, botched attempts, moments of panic. But over time, his approach grew calculated, strategic, clinical. He selected victims based on predictability. He exploited routine. He timed his movements to public transportation schedules, weather forecasts, shift changes. Rainy nights became his favored hunting ground. Poor visibility. Fewer witnesses. More ambient noise. Evidence dissolved. He was, in his own mind, mastering his craft. But perhaps most unsettling were the entries marked not by red circles, but by blank spaces.
Dozens of them.
Women he had followed, observed, mapped, but never attacked. Why some were spared and others not remained unclear. Random mercy, shifting impulse, or some internal logic no one else could decipher. During interrogation, Seo initially refused to discuss the archive. When confronted with its existence, his face tightened, a flicker of anger flashing across otherwise impassive features. For the first time, his composure cracked. He accused police of theft, of violation, of misunderstanding. "This is private," he said quietly. The word echoed grotesquely. Private. As if cataloging human suffering were a hobby, an intimate ritual, a personal diary. When pressed about the victims, Seo oscillated between denial and selective admission. He confessed to Minasio's murder. He acknowledged 2 assaults. He admitted to stalking countless women. But for the majority of the cases, he claimed false memory, exaggeration, fantasy. Detectives knew better. Forensic teams scoured the apartment. Hidden compartments yielded more artifacts: buttons, fragments of fabric, hair ties, broken jewelry, subway tokens, and in one sealed container, a lock of dark hair bound with thread. Each item was photographed, bagged, analyzed, cross-checked. Slowly, names emerged. Families were notified. Some collapsed in disbelief. Others wept with bitter relief, finally freed from decades of uncertainty. A few responded with rage, demanding answers that no explanation could satisfy. One mother screamed over the phone, her voice shredding into raw sound, "Why did you let him live among us?" There was no answer. As news of the archive leaked, public reaction erupted. Media outlets flooded the airwaves with breaking alerts. Headlines screamed of a hidden serial predator, of decades of police failure, of a city betrayed by silence. Protests erupted outside precincts. Candles burned in vigil lines stretching for blocks. Social networks ignited with grief, fury, and disbelief. How could this happen? How could one man disappear into the machinery of daily life while leaving such devastation in his wake? Inside the interrogation room, Co seemed untouched by the storm. He ate quietly, slept deeply, requested books, asked for paper and pen. When questioned about remorse, he offered only ambiguity. "I never meant for it to become this," he said once, as if there had ever been a version of his actions that could be justified. But the most haunting discovery came from the final shelf of the archive. A set of folders dated years after the supposed end of his crimes. Recent entries, surveillance logs, maps, new names, which meant that even as technology advanced, even as cameras multiplied and databases expanded, Co had not stopped. He had only adapted. And now, investigators faced a horrifying possibility: that somewhere, even now, another victim's fate might still hang unresolved in the darkness. The interrogation room was stripped of warmth, a box of sterile light and shadow where time seemed to fold inward, pressing against the walls. The air carried the faint hum of electricity and the low mechanical breath of ventilation. Across the metal table, Co Jae-hyun sat upright, his posture immaculate, his hands resting lightly atop one another, as if he were attending a formal meeting rather than confronting the wreckage of dozens of lives. Detective Park Jun-ho entered without ceremony, carrying a thin folder. Inside it lay photographs, evidence, fragments of human stories frozen in moments of violence. Co's eyes followed Park's movements, alert, watchful, yet strangely distant, as though he observed everything through a pane of glass.
Park did not speak at first.
He placed the folder on the table and slowly opened it, revealing the image of Kong Min Seo, smiling in a university graduation photo, alive, hopeful, unbroken. Co stared. A tremor rippled through his fingers. Then Park turned the page. The alley. The rain.
The body.
Co inhaled sharply. "You've had 28 years," Park said quietly. "It's time to tell the truth." Silence stretched. Minutes passed. Finally, Co spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I watched her for weeks," he said. "She was careful, always aware. But that night she was tired. People make mistakes when they're tired." His words fell into the room like cold metal. He described following her at a distance, blending into foot traffic, using reflections in shop windows to track her movements without being seen. He waited until the street emptied, until the rain-muffled sound, until the moment felt inevitable. He claimed he never intended to kill her, only to frighten, to feel power, to see fear bloom in her eyes.
But something inside him snapped.
A surge of rage. A blow struck harder than planned. Then another. And another. Until the fear in her eyes went still. Park listened without interruption, his jaw clenched, fists tight beneath the table. "And the others?" he asked. Co shook his head slowly.
"Not all of them," he said. "Some.
But not as many as you think." Park slid the archive inventory across the table. 32 red circles, he said. 16 confirmed victims. 5 missing. 6 never reported. You want to explain that? Sio's gaze flickered. He leaned back, exhaling. Some were fantasies, he said. Plans I never carried out. Thoughts I wrote down to control them. Park did not believe him. Neither did the evidence. Forensic teams had already linked multiple artifacts from Sio's apartment to unsolved cases, fibers matching crime scenes, soil samples consistent with burial locations, metal fragments consistent with weapons used in assaults. Each new result tightened the net around his denials. But Sio persisted, clinging to ambiguity, offering half-truths, fractured admissions, selective memory. It was a strategy as old as crime itself. Control the narrative, limit culpability, create confusion where certainty threatened. Yet cracks appeared. During one late-night session, exhausted, dehydrated, his guard slipped. He began describing a woman whose name did not appear in any database. A factory worker, early 20s, short hair, walked home along a riverside path near Mapo. She kept singing, he murmured. Even when I grabbed her, she wouldn't stop. Park froze. No such case had ever been reported. Investigators halted the interrogation and rushed to cross-check missing person records from the late 1990s and early 2000s. It took hours, but eventually a match surfaced. Young Hae-in, reported missing in 2001. Her family, migrant workers from a rural province, had assumed she ran away. Police had listed her as a voluntary disappearance. No body. No suspects. No investigation. Now, guided by Sio's halting description, search teams combed the riverside embankment he mentioned. Beneath a collapsed concrete slab, buried beneath layers of silt and debris, they discovered skeletal remains. Time had stripped away flesh, but not identity. Dental records confirmed it. Young Hae-in had never run away. She had been taken. And now, after 24 years, she was finally found. The discovery shattered any remaining illusion that Sio's archive was mere fantasy. It was a ledger of death. Public outrage surged. Families of missing women flooded police stations, clutching photographs, begging for answers, hoping against hope, fearing the worst. Cold case hotlines crashed under the weight of calls. The government launched an emergency review of unresolved crimes spanning 3 decades. Sio's interrogation intensified. Confronted with the recovered remains, he grew increasingly agitated, pacing the room, rubbing his temples, muttering to himself. I didn't mean to remember her, he said. Some things are better buried. Park leaned forward. You buried her, he replied. The words struck with surgical precision. In that moment, Sio's composure finally collapsed. He began speaking rapidly, fragments tumbling out, confessions and denials colliding, memories surfacing like bodies rising through dark water. He admitted to at least 11 murders. He hinted at more. He described methods of control, restraint, silence. He spoke of rituals, washing his hands repeatedly, rearranging objects symmetrically, documenting every detail, as if by organizing horror, he could contain it. Psychologists later identified traits of obsessive-compulsive disorder interwoven with psychopathy, a mind driven by compulsion and devoid of empathy, seeking mastery over chaos by manufacturing it. Yet, even as the truth poured out, contradictions remained. Sio insisted some red-circled names were fabrications. But forensic corroboration continued to confirm his involvement. The more he spoke, the more the scale of his crimes expanded. And then, in a final twist, Sio revealed something no one had anticipated. He had not always acted alone. There were moments, he said, when others had helped. Not knowingly, not intentionally, but enough to facilitate. Drivers who offered rides. Security guards who ignored screams. Co-workers who covered shifts. Bystanders who chose not to see. A web of passive complicity woven from indifference, fear, and routine. A system that allowed him to move unseen, to hunt in plain sight, to exist undisturbed for decades. And as investigators traced these threads, they confronted an unsettling truth. That the monster had not thrived solely because of his cunning. but because of the countless small silences that surrounded him. The first courtroom appearance of Seo Jae-hyun drew a crowd so dense it spilled into the streets, cameras stacked atop tripods like watchful sentinels, journalists shouting questions that collided into a single roar, families clutching photographs, their faces carved by decades of grief and waiting. Police barricades strained beneath the pressure, holding back a public desperate to see the man whose shadow had stretched across nearly 30 years of unsolved terror. Seo emerged in handcuffs, flanked by armed officers, his face pale, his eyes hollow, his expression unreadable. For a brief instant, the city saw him not as a monster, but as a thin, aging man, shoulders slightly hunched, hair graying at the temples. And yet, behind that ordinary exterior lay a legacy of devastation so vast it defied comprehension. Inside the courtroom, silence fell with surgical abruptness. Every breath, every movement, every flicker of expression seemed amplified. When Seo lifted his eyes and scanned the gallery, he met the gaze of mothers who had buried empty coffins, of fathers who had died waiting for answers, of siblings who had grown old carrying photographs of girls who never aged. The weight of those stares pressed down like gravity. And still he said nothing. As prosecutors began presenting evidence, the magnitude of his crimes unfolded in relentless detail. Maps overlaid with attack sites. Surveillance logs reconstructed from his own meticulous notes. Forensic charts linking fibers, soil, metal fragments, DNA. A web of connections stretching across decades, stitching together what had once appeared to be isolated tragedies into a single, horrifying narrative. One by one, cold cases reopened. Lee Hae-jin's drowning was reclassified as homicide. Traces of sediment found in Seo's apartment matched the riverbank where her body was discovered. Park Soo-yeon's disappearance was re-examined after her subway card was found among Seo's possessions, hidden inside a hollowed book. Jung Hae-in's recovered remains confirmed what her family had feared for 24 years. Each revelation struck like a blow. Families were summoned to police stations, ushered into quiet rooms, confronted with truths that tore open old wounds and poured salt into them. Some collapsed in sobs. Others stared in silence, as if emotion itself had been exhausted by time. For Min Seo's parents, the confirmation was both devastating and strangely clarifying. The uncertainty that had haunted them for decades finally gave way to certainty, however unbearable. They no longer needed to imagine infinite possibilities. Now they knew. Yet knowledge did not bring peace. It brought rage. It brought questions. It brought a crushing realization of everything that had been lost. And then came the confrontations. Under court order, carefully controlled meetings were arranged between Seo and the families of his victims. Psychologists warned of unpredictable emotional fallout. Prosecutors argued the encounters might elicit further confessions. Families insisted. They deserved to look into the eyes of the man who had destroyed their lives. The first meeting took place in a secure chamber within the detention facility. Bulletproof glass separated the two sides. Microphones recorded every breath. Min Seo's mother entered slowly, supported by her husband. She carried a framed photograph of her daughter, smiling brightly in a summer dress, frozen forever at 24. Seo sat motionless. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she lifted the photograph, pressing it against the glass. "Do you remember her face?" she asked. Seo's gaze flickered. "Yes," he said. Her breath hitched. "She was kind," she whispered. "She helped neighbors. She sent money home. She wanted to adopt a dog. She wanted to travel. She wanted to live." Tears slid down her cheeks, silent, unstoppable. "You took all of that," she said. "For what?" Seo hesitated. "I don't know," he replied. The answer detonated like a bomb. The father surged forward, fists slamming against the glass, shouting words that dissolved into raw sound. Guards intervened, pulling him back, as Seo remained seated, his expression barely changing. Other meetings followed. A younger sister who demanded to know where her sibling's body lay. A husband who had waited 10 years before remarrying, unable to accept his wife's disappearance. A son who had grown into adulthood without a mother, now facing the man who ensured she would never watch him grow. Some screamed. Some cursed.
Some begged.
Some collapsed. Co responded with fragments of memory, incomplete directions, partial confessions. Search teams were dispatched repeatedly, combing forests, riverbanks, abandoned construction sites. In several locations, skeletal remains were recovered, their identities slowly restored through forensic analysis. With each discovery, the death toll climbed. 11, 12, 14, 16. The true number remained uncertain, shrouded by time and erasure. Public reaction intensified. Protests demanded accountability not just from CO, but from the institutions that had failed to stop him. Investigations were launched into procedural negligence, evidence mishandling, missed warning signs. Senior officers from the 1990s were summoned before parliamentary committees. Internal memos surfaced, revealing early doubts that had been dismissed, connections that had gone unexplored, leads abandoned under political pressure. The narrative shifted. This was no longer only the story of a predator. It was the story of a system that had looked away. Documentaries began production. Journalists dissected every stage of the investigation. Social media transformed victims into symbols, their faces shared millions of times, their stories echoing across continents. Seoul's image as a hypermodern, hypersecure metropolis cracked, revealing the fragile human reality beneath technological progress. And through it all, CO remained largely silent. In private sessions with psychologists, he spoke of emptiness, of disconnection, of a world that had always felt distant, unreal. He described watching others live while he stood apart, invisible, unneeded, unwanted. Violence, he claimed, had given him existence, had made him feel tangible. Yet even in these moments of supposed introspection, empathy never emerged. Only self-reference. Only self-preservation. The trial stretched on, months bleeding into years, as prosecutors assembled one of the largest criminal cases in Korean history. Tens of thousands of pages of evidence. Hundreds of witnesses. Dozens of expert testimonies. But even as the legal machinery ground forward, another revelation loomed. A detail buried deep within CO's archive suggested that his first offense may not have occurred in Seoul, but somewhere else, much earlier, which meant the beginning of his story, the true genesis of the nightmare, might lie far beyond the reach of the current investigation. And if that were true, then even now, the full scale of his crimes had yet to be uncovered. Long before Seoul's neon lights swallowed the night, before surveillance cameras blinked awake across every intersection, before digital footprints mapped each human step, there was a rural town in South Gyeongsang province where silence hung heavier than fog and secrets sank deep into the soil, and it was there, investigators now believed, that CO Jae-hyun first learned how easily a human life could disappear. The town was little more than a cluster of concrete houses clinging to the side of a mountain, stitched together by narrow roads and unspoken rules. Everyone knew everyone. Privacy was a luxury. Rumors traveled faster than cars. But some stories never left. CO was born there in 1969, the second son of a factory laborer and a seamstress. His childhood records, sparse and incomplete, painted the portrait of a withdrawn boy, academically average, socially isolated, frequently absent. Teachers described him as quiet, emotionally distant, detached from peers. He had few friends. None lasted long. Neighbors remembered something else. They remembered screams. Not loud, not public. Muted. Filtered through thin concrete walls at night. His father drank heavily. His mother worked double shifts. Discipline was harsh. Punishment unpredictable. In a home ruled by fear, silence became survival. Psychologists later theorized that CO's early exposure to violence, combined with emotional neglect, laid the foundation for a personality shaped by control, obsession, and emotional void. But theory alone could not explain the precision, the patience, the cold deliberation that would later define his crimes. To understand that, investigators traced his adolescence. At 16, Seo worked part-time at a local warehouse, loading trucks after school. It was there that he learned the rhythms of logistics, schedules, routes, delays, human patterns. He learned when places emptied, when guards grew tired, when no one was watching. He learned how the world moved, and how to move through it unseen. In 1986, a girl named Choi Eun-young vanished from the neighboring village. 17. High school student. Last seen walking home along a dirt road after evening tutoring. Her disappearance triggered brief concern, then resignation. Rural runaway, authorities concluded. No evidence of foul play. No body. No investigation. Her family waited. Years passed. She never returned. When detectives reopened cold cases in the region, Choi Eun-young's name resurfaced, buried within brittle paper files and fading memories. The route she walked, the time she vanished, the weather conditions.
Rain.
And when investigators compared those details to Seo's early movements, the alignment was unsettling. At the time of her disappearance, Seo had been working late shifts at a storage depot less than 1 kilometer from her route home. Several coworkers recalled his habit of lingering after hours, wandering outside, smoking, watching the road. No one had thought anything of it.
He was just a boy.
Until now. Search teams combed the surrounding hills, guided by vague recollections and geographic profiling algorithms that mapped likely disposal sites based on later crimes. After weeks of excavation, beneath a tangle of roots at the base of a cliff, they uncovered fragments of fabric and bone. DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Choi Eun-young. She had never run away. She had never started a new life. She had died alone in the dark. The discovery reframed everything. Seo's timeline of violence extended further back than anyone had imagined. His first kill had not occurred in the anonymity of a metropolis, but in the intimate stillness of a rural path, where silence itself served as an accomplice. Investigators now understood that the escalation seen in Seoul had been the product of years of refinement. Each act had taught him something: how victims resisted, how communities reacted, how police pursued, how evidence vanished. He learned patience. He learned restraint. He learned invisibility. In his early 20s, Seo moved to Seoul, drawn by the promise of anonymity, of reinvention, of opportunity. But the city did not transform him. It liberated him. In Seoul, he became a shadow among millions, a faceless presence moving through endless crowds, his internal compulsions shielded by urban indifference. Surveillance was limited. Neighborhoods were fragmented. People rarely noticed each other. For a predator, it was paradise. From the late 1980s through the early 2000s, his crimes followed the city's expansion, shifting with redevelopment zones, transit line extensions, population migrations. When neighborhoods modernized and cameras multiplied, he adapted, relocating to peripheral districts, industrial corridors, temporary housing zones, construction areas where transients masked disappearance. Each move was deliberate. Each adaptation calculated. Yet even as his methods evolved, his motivations remained disturbingly constant.
Control.
Observation. Possession. In one recovered journal fragment, Seo wrote, "They exist until I decide they do not. That makes me real." The sentence chilled investigators, because it revealed the fundamental core of his identity, a man who only felt alive when extinguishing life. As prosecutors built their case, they recognized that Seo's story mirrored a broader societal failure, one that transcended a single criminal. In rural regions, disappearances were dismissed. In urban centers, anonymity erased responsibility. Between the two, predators learned to operate, feeding on institutional blind spots. Seo had not simply exploited these gaps. He had mastered them. The courtroom proceedings expanded accordingly. Prosecutors introduced evidence of early crimes, connecting dots across geography and time, constructing a narrative of continuous predation stretching nearly 40 years. Defense attorneys argued contamination, coincidence, speculative profiling. But forensic evidence, corroborated confessions, and recovered remains overwhelmed every objection. Public perception shifted again. This was no longer merely a cold case breakthrough. It was the unveiling of a lifelong campaign of violence. And as the scope widened, another haunting question surfaced. How many others like him remained hidden? How many stories lay buried beneath forgotten paths, abandoned buildings, unmarked graves? How many names would never be recovered? As the trial approached its final phase, the city braced itself for a verdict that could not restore the dead, but might finally acknowledge their existence. Yet for the families, closure remained elusive. Because truth, once uncovered, does not always heal. Sometimes it only deepens the wound. The courtroom fell into a stillness so absolute it felt artificial, as if the air itself had been drained of motion, every breath suspended in anticipation. Outside, a sea of reporters waited behind barricades, microphones poised, cameras trained on the courthouse doors, their lenses fixed like unblinking eyes. Inside, families of the victims sat shoulder to shoulder, hands clenched, knuckles pale, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. After nearly 2 years of proceedings, the trial of Seo Jae-hyun had reached its final moment. Tens of thousands of pages of testimony, hundreds of witnesses, forensic charts that traced microscopic threads of DNA across decades, maps that transformed the geography of Seoul into a constellation of horror, psychological evaluations dissecting a mind shaped by neglect, violence, obsession, and control. Each element layered atop the next, constructing a narrative so heavy it threatened to collapse beneath its own weight. Yet now, all of it condensed into a single question.
Guilty.
Or not? The judge entered, robes whispering against the polished floor. The murmurs died instantly. The gallery rose, then sat, the synchronized movement sharp, mechanical, betraying the tension that had coiled for months. Seo Jae-hyun stood. His face was calm, almost serene. No tremor touched his hands. No flicker crossed his eyes. He seemed detached from the magnitude of the moment, as if the verdict concerned someone else, a distant stranger, an abstract concept. The judge began to read. Each word fell into the silence like a stone dropped into deep water, sending ripples outward.
Guilty. Guilty. Guilty.
On all counts, multiple murders, aggravated sexual assault, unlawful confinement, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, desecration of human remains. As the litany unfolded, a sound rose from the benches behind the prosecution. A low, broken wail. It grew, multiplied, fractured into sobs, gasps, whispers, prayers, curses. Some families collapsed into one another. Others stared forward, frozen, as if their bodies could not yet absorb what their ears had heard. Mina Seo's mother closed her eyes, pressing her hands together until her knuckles whitened. Her lips moved silently, forming words only she could hear.
Her father bowed his head.
For nearly 3 decades, they had lived suspended between hope and despair, never certain whether their daughter's last moments were marked by terror or mercy, never knowing whether her killer would be held accountable. Now, certainty had arrived. But certainty did not feel like relief. It felt like exhaustion. The judge continued. Seo Jae-hyun was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In South Korea, the death penalty remains legal but unofficially suspended. Life imprisonment, therefore, represented the harshest enforceable punishment. As the words settled, Seo's expression did not change. Only once did he lift his gaze, scanning the courtroom, pausing briefly on the cluster of families, before lowering his eyes again. No apology. No remorse. No plea. Just silence. When guards led him away, the crowd surged forward, shouts erupting, questions hurled into the void. Why did you do it? Do you regret it? How many more? Seo did not turn. The heavy doors closed behind him with a final, resonant thud. And just like that, the man who had haunted the city for nearly half a century vanished from public view, swallowed by the system he had evaded for so long. But for those left behind, the story did not end. In the weeks following the verdict, Seoul entered a period of collective reckoning. Editorials flooded newspapers. Academic forums convened emergency panels. Lawmakers proposed sweeping reforms to cold case investigations, evidence storage protocols, and missing persons procedures. Funding was allocated to reopen thousands of dormant files. Advanced forensic units were expanded. Data integration systems were upgraded to detect cross-case patterns that human analysts might miss. The city promised change. Yet promises could not restore what had been taken. At memorial services across the country, families gathered to mourn not only their own dead, but those whose names were never recovered. Candles lined sidewalks. Flowers covered fences. Photographs of young women, smiling in moments long gone, flickered in the glow of vigil lights. Strangers stood together in silence, bound by grief for people they had never known. At one such vigil, Minecio's sister stepped forward, her voice trembling yet resolute. "For years, we lived inside a question mark," she said. "Now we have a period, but a period does not erase the sentence that came before it." Her words echoed across social media, shared millions of times, capturing the collective sentiment of a society forced to confront not just a killer, but the systems, silences, and assumptions that had allowed him to exist. In the months that followed, cold case units across the nation reported a surge of breakthroughs. Long-forgotten evidence reanalyzed. Missing persons located. Unsolved homicides finally named. Seo's capture had sparked a domino effect, a renewed belief that even the oldest mysteries could yield to persistence and technology. Yet each solved case brought its own burden, because every answer carried the weight of delayed justice. Every identification arrived decades too late. And every family faced the impossible task of rebuilding a life around knowledge that should have come far earlier. As for Detective Park Joon-ho, the case that had consumed nearly half his career finally closed. On his last day before retirement, he returned alone to the alley where Minecio had died. The street was unrecognizable now. Bright storefronts, smooth pavement, security cameras blinking quietly overhead. Pedestrians passed without pause, unaware of the history beneath their feet. Park stood in the center of the alley, rain beginning to fall, light at first, then steady, the familiar sound carrying him back through time. For a moment, he imagined her footsteps. Then they were gone. He left a single white flower against the wall and walked away. But even as the city moved forward, one final truth lingered. That justice, when delayed, becomes something fragile. That memory, when neglected, becomes dangerous. And that the most terrifying crimes are not always those committed in darkness, but those allowed to persist in plain sight. Long after the cameras shut down, long after the headlines faded, long after Seo Jae-hyun's name was locked inside court archives and prison registries, the city of Seoul continued to move forward, but it did so differently, as if every street now carried an invisible memory, every shadow a question that could no longer be ignored. For the families, life after the verdict did not resemble closure. It resembled survival. Minecio's parents returned to their small hometown by the coast, unable to remain in the apartment where her laughter had once echoed. They planted a tree in her name on a windswept hill overlooking the sea, its roots gripping the earth, its branches reaching into endless sky, a living monument to a daughter whose future had been stolen. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, they returned, standing side by side in silence, watching waves crash against the rocks, listening for a voice that would never answer. Her sister moved to another country, chasing distance, chasing anonymity, chasing a version of life untouched by memory. Yet even across oceans, the nightmares followed. Faces blurred into darkness. Footsteps echoed behind her in empty streets. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she still heard the rain. Families of other victims struggled in similar ways. Some founded advocacy groups, dedicating their lives to missing persons and cold case awareness. Others withdrew from public view, their grief too heavy for display. A few sought vengeance through civil litigation, demanding accountability from institutions that had failed their daughters, sisters, wives. Lawsuits moved slowly through courts, their progress measured in years, not months, but they represented something vital: the refusal to let negligence disappear into history. Inside police departments, the CO case became mandatory study. New recruits learned it not merely as an example of forensic breakthrough, but as a cautionary tale of tunnel vision, institutional inertia, and the catastrophic cost of ignoring patterns. Evidence storage protocols were rewritten. Interdepartmental databases integrated. Artificial intelligence tools deployed to detect behavioral similarities across decades of crime data. The past was no longer allowed to sleep undisturbed. And yet, even as systems improved, an uneasy realization took hold. Seo Jae-hyun had not been a supernatural anomaly. He had been human.
Flawed.
Invisible. Ordinary. And that was precisely what made him terrifying. Because if one man could move unseen for nearly 40 years, what else might remain hidden within the architecture of everyday life? Public consciousness shifted. People paid attention. They noticed unfamiliar faces lingering near subway exits. They questioned empty lots and poorly lit alleys. They challenged assumptions. They spoke when something felt wrong. Yet vigilance carried its own burden. Anxiety increased. Paranoia bloomed. Innocent behaviors were sometimes misinterpreted as threat. Trust, once fractured, proved difficult to restore. The city had gained awareness, but lost innocence. Years passed. Seo aged behind prison walls, his world reduced to concrete, steel, and silence. Psychological evaluations noted no significant remorse, only intellectual acknowledgement of wrongdoing. He declined interviews, refused contact with media, spent most days reading, writing, exercising in solitude. Some speculated he feared public exposure. Others believed he simply no longer cared. To him, perhaps, the world had already ended. But outside, memory refused to fade. Documentaries retold the story. Podcasts dissected timelines. Books reconstructed the investigation in painstaking detail. University courses analyzed the case as a study in criminology, sociology, and institutional failure. Each retelling reawakened the same uneasy question: how many similar stories remained untold? Because while Seo's capture represented a monumental victory, it also illuminated a vast, unsettling landscape of unresolved crimes scattered across decades, across borders, across forgotten communities. For every case solved, hundreds remained suspended in uncertainty. And so, the ripple effect of the Seoul 1997 cold case breakthrough extended far beyond one killer. It reshaped how society understood justice, how it defined responsibility, how it interpreted silence. In memorial parks and subway stations, plaques now bore the names of the known victims. Passers-by paused, if only briefly, to read them, to imagine the lives that might have unfolded had fate chosen differently. In those fleeting moments, strangers became witnesses, carrying fragments of stories forward. Yet one final question lingered, haunting investigators and families alike. Had Seo truly confessed everything? Or were there still names unspoken, graves undiscovered, stories buried too deep for even modern science to unearth? The archive had ended, but its edges were frayed, incomplete, suggestive of more. And perhaps that uncertainty was the final cruelty. That even in resolution, some mysteries endure. Because evil rarely leaves a clean record. It leaves gaps, silences, absences that echo louder than any confession. And in those echoes, the past continues to breathe. Los Angeles, summer of 2002. A city of endless lights, restless nights, and silent shadows moving between neon reflections. A city that never truly sleeps, yet somehow allows entire lives to disappear without a sound. And on one quiet night, in a small apartment near Echo Park, a young woman vanished, without struggle, without witnesses, without explanation, leaving behind only fragments of fear and a mystery that would haunt an entire community for more than 2 decades. Her name was Emily Carter, 23 years old, a journalism student, bright, driven, ambitious. She believed in stories, in truth, in uncovering what others tried to hide. She had moved to Los Angeles with dreams larger than the city itself, hoping one day to write headlines that mattered. Instead, she became one. Her roommate returned home late that night to an apartment that felt wrong. The air was heavy. The lights were off. Emily's phone lay shattered on the kitchen floor. A faint smear of dried blood trailed across the tile, barely visible unless you were searching for it. No sign of forced entry. No overturned furniture. No chaos. Just absence. And silence. Police arrived within minutes. They searched the apartment, the surrounding streets, nearby dumpsters, rooftops, alleyways. Nothing. No witnesses came forward. No neighbors reported screams. No cameras capture her leaving. No taxi receipts. No digital trail. It was as if Emily had simply evaporated. At first, investigators believed she had left voluntarily. But her passport, wallet, and laptop were still inside the apartment. Her bank account showed no activity. Her email went silent. Her social media stopped updating. Friends insisted she would never leave without telling someone. Her mother flew in from Minnesota, waiting day after day by the phone, praying for news that never came. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Search parties combed nearby parks and hills. Divers checked reservoirs. Flyers covered street lamps and shop windows. Her face became familiar across the city. Yet nothing surfaced. 6 months later, detectives quietly shifted their focus. Emily was no longer considered missing. She was presumed dead. But without a body, without evidence, without suspects, the investigation stalled. Leads dried up. Witnesses forgot details. Files gathered dust. By 2004, the case was officially labeled a cold case, one more name added to the long list of unsolved disappearances swallowed by Los Angeles. Years passed. The city evolved. Buildings were demolished. Streets were rebuilt. People moved on. But Emily's mother never did. Every birthday, every holiday, every silent anniversary reopened the same wound. She kept Emily's room untouched. Her clothes folded. Her photos lined neatly along the walls. Waiting. Hoping. Refusing to accept a world where her daughter had vanished without answers. And then, 21 years later, in December 2023, everything changed. A man walked into a small police station in Riverside County.
He looked ordinary, middle-aged,
slightly overweight, tired eyes, nervous hands. His name was Daniel Ross, a married father of 2, a certified electrical technician. No criminal record, no known violent past, a man no one would ever suspect. He sat down in the interrogation room, folded his hands together, stared at the table for a long moment, then whispered a sentence that froze every officer in the room. I killed someone. In Los Angeles. In 2002. Detectives initially believed it was another false confession, a desperate cry for attention, mental illness, guilt projection. But Daniel kept talking.
Calmly. Precisely.
Naming streets. Describing rooms. Recalling details that were never released to the public. And then he said her name. Emily Carter. The room fell silent. Daniel explained he had met Emily online through a college discussion forum. Their conversations started casually, then grew personal. He became obsessed. She tried to distance herself, tried to end communication, tried to reclaim her life. He refused. On the night she disappeared, he drove to her apartment unannounced. They argued. Voices rose. Accusations flew. She threatened to call the police. He panicked. He shoved her. She fell, striking her head on the corner of the kitchen counter. Blood spilled onto the floor. She lay motionless. He told detectives he knelt beside her, shaking, whispering her name. She didn't respond. And in that moment, fear replaced reason. Instead of calling for help, He wrapped his hands around her neck and squeezed until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he sat beside her body for nearly an hour, unable to comprehend what he had done. Then survival instinct took over. He wrapped her in plastic, placed her in the trunk of his car, and drove through the night toward the Mojave Desert. Under a moonless sky, far from city lights, he dug a shallow grave near an abandoned service road. He buried her beneath sand and stone, marking the spot with a single rock. Then he drove home, washed his hands, kissed his sleeping wife, and went to work the next morning as if nothing had happened. For 21 years, Daniel lived a double life. He raised children, attended school events, went on family vacations, smiled in photos, paid taxes, fixed wiring, made dinner, slept beside his wife, while carrying the weight of a murder that never faded. He said Emily followed him everywhere. In dreams, in reflections, in silence. Her voice echoed in his mind. Her face appeared in strangers. Every breaking news alert made his heart race. Every knock on the door felt like the end. But no one came. Until guilt became unbearable. By 2023, insomnia consumed him. Panic attacks crippled him. His health collapsed. And finally, he decided he could no longer carry the secret alone. Detectives reopened the case immediately. Guided by Daniel, forensic teams traveled deep into the desert. After hours of searching, they uncovered skeletal remains. Alongside them lay a corroded silver necklace, one Emily wore every day. DNA confirmation followed days later. After 21 years, Emily Carter was finally found. The announcement sent shockwaves through Los Angeles. News outlets exploded. Social media erupted. A cold case long forgotten suddenly dominated headlines. But for Emily's mother, the revelation brought no relief. Only the final, devastating confirmation of a truth she had feared since the beginning. At the sentencing hearing, she stood before the court, holding her daughter's childhood photo. "You stole her future," she said quietly. "And you stole 21 years of my life." Daniel Ross was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. No appeal. No mercy. As the courtroom emptied, reporters crowded outside, cameras flashing, microphones reaching, questions flying. But inside, one woman remained seated, staring at the empty witness stand, the place where her daughter should have stood, should have lived, should have grown old. One confession shattered 2 decades of silence. One truth rewrote an entire investigation. One life lost. And countless lives scarred forever. Because in a city where millions pass each other every day without noticing, sometimes the most terrifying truth is this. A killer can live beside you, smile beside you, laugh beside you, for decades. And no one will ever know. The apartment still smelled the same when investigators reopened the door. 21 years later, the paint was different. The furniture long gone. The walls repainted. New tenants unaware they slept above the echo of a scream that never reached the street. Yet beneath the layers of renovation, beneath fresh tiles and plaster, the past was still there, waiting. Crime scene analysts moved slowly, deliberately, guided by old photographs, faded floor plans, and brittle case notes written by hands that had since retired or passed away. Every inch of that apartment had been searched in 2002. At least, that was the official record. But now, armed with modern forensic tools, the team approached the space with a single burning question. What had they missed? The answer emerged within hours. Under the newly installed kitchen tiles, technicians detected trace blood residue using advanced luminol scanning. The pattern was faint but unmistakable, a heavy impact followed by a smear that suggested a body had been dragged across the floor. The original investigation had documented only a minor blood stain near the sink, dismissed as accidental. Now, reanalysis revealed something darker. The blood spatter trajectory indicated a violent collision with the countertop, precisely matching Daniel Ross's confession. For 21 years, the truth had been sealed beneath ceramic and grout. But the apartment was only the beginning. Back in evidence storage, Detectives reopened boxes untouched since the early 2000s. Dust-coated bags, faded labels, cracked plastic seals. Inside them lay fragments of Emily's world, clothing fibers, fingerprints, hair strands, electronic debris from her shattered phone. Technology had evolved. So had forensic possibility. DNA extraction from microscopic skin cells now allowed analysts to isolate a full genetic profile from a partial palm print recovered from Emily's refrigerator door. That profile matched Daniel Ross, a match that would have been impossible to identify in 2002. A single handprint, overlooked, ignored, forgotten. The case cracked open wider. Investigators traced Daniel's movements during the week of Emily's disappearance. Cell tower pings, once too imprecise to be useful, were reprocessed using modern triangulation algorithms. The data revealed that his phone had been near Echo Park the night she vanished, and again hours later, traveling east toward the Mojave Desert. In 2002, those signals were dismissed as inconclusive noise. Now they became a roadmap of guilt. Further analysis uncovered something even more chilling. Surveillance footage from a gas station near Barstow, recorded just hours after Emily's disappearance, showed Daniel's vehicle stopping briefly to refuel. The footage was grainy, his face barely visible, but the timestamp aligned perfectly with his confession. In the trunk, forensic specialists later discovered residual soil particles that matched the desert burial site. Every thread pointed to him. Every answer had been waiting, buried not only in sand, but in neglect. Detectives began reconstructing the original timeline, minute by minute, hour by hour, exposing critical failures that now felt impossible to ignore. In 2002, Emily's laptop contained unsent draft emails, messages she had started writing but never completed. One of them was addressed to a close friend. It read, "He won't stop calling. He keeps showing up. I'm scared." The email was saved but never sent. Investigators at the time cataloged it but failed to trace the unknown contact she referenced. That contact was Daniel. Phone records from 2002 showed over 80 calls from a prepaid number to Emily's phone in the weeks before her disappearance. That number was never linked to Daniel because he had purchased the phone using cash, and the carrier records were poorly archived. Now, modern database cross-matching tied that number to a repair shop where Daniel regularly worked. Surveillance records from the shop placed him purchasing prepaid SIM cards during that exact period. A pattern emerged. Stalking, obsession, escalation, all invisible at the time, and all unmistakable now. Investigators re-interviewed Emily's former neighbors. Memories stirred. Details long buried resurfaced. One neighbor recalled a man standing across the street late at night, watching Emily's windows. Another remembered hearing muffled shouting, but assuming it was a domestic argument that resolved itself. A third admitted seeing a strange car parked nearby on several occasions. None of them had reported it. Because in Los Angeles, noise is normal. Strangers are everywhere. And danger often hides in plain sight. Psychologists later reviewed Daniel's interrogation recordings. His voice never cracked. His breathing barely changed. His emotional detachment was unsettling. He spoke of Emily not as a person, but as a problem that had spiraled out of control. Yet during one moment, his composure shattered. When shown Emily's childhood photographs, his eyes dropped.
His jaw tightened.
And for exactly 7 seconds, silence swallowed the room. 7 seconds that revealed more guilt than hours of confession. Experts concluded Daniel exhibited classic traits of long-term compartmentalization, a psychological defense that allowed him to live a normal life while suppressing unbearable trauma. But suppression is never permanent. Eventually, memory demands payment. And the cost is everything. As the reopened investigation unfolded publicly, outrage ignited. How had so much evidence been overlooked? How had so many warnings gone unheard? How many other cold cases hid similar truths beneath layers of time, negligence, and technological limitation? Emily's case became a symbol, not just of murder, but of missed opportunity. and the terrifying possibility that countless victims still lie buried, waiting for science, chance, or conscience to finally uncover them. Because sometimes, justice does not arrive by brilliant detective work. Sometimes it comes by accident. Sometimes it comes by confession. And sometimes it never comes at all. Yet for Emily, after 21 years of silence, the earth finally spoke. And when it did, it revealed not just her bones, but every mistake that had allowed her killer to walk free.